Launch season continues to roll on. Katie George, Laurence Edmondson, and Nate Saunders. Unfortunately, we are no longer in the same place. We all left New York, went our separate ways. Both of you clearly made it across the pond safely.
Just about, yeah. I think it is a massive change, isn't it, from going from a lovely stage, quite a chilly stage, I would say. You know, that'd be my only criticism of the stage we're on. And then back to doing it here. I've just about got over the jet lag, I think. Laurence and I were talking about this earlier. So just about in one piece. But jet lag's not a bad thing to complain about after a nice little trip.
Laurence, how are you feeling?
Yeah, pretty good, actually. I was only there for 3 nights. So I just kind of somehow stayed on more or less the UK time zone. I slipped back into it. But yeah, such a cool trip. I was saying earlier, I don't think I've ever been to a launch event that far away, and also that's kind of had that hype going into it. So yeah, it was pretty cool to be out in the US. Says a lot about where F1's going. So yeah, it was really, really good fun.
Yeah, it was a great time. Very exciting, obviously, to be there for the first season launch in the United States ever. Of course, it was great being in person with the two of you. Finally, the last time we were in the same place was down in Miami for that Grand Prix. We dropped our special edition of our Unlapped podcast with Daniel Ricciardo, which was so much fun getting to have that time with him. Let's just rehash real quick what you guys thought of the event, what was telling, and what did you think of our time that we got to spend with Daniel and what he had to say in that hour or so on our pod?
It's kind of a funny one, isn't it? Go on.
No, I was going to say the highlight was absolutely the time with Daniel, as far as I was concerned, because I think it didn't go amiss as people watching that the car that got revealed looked an awful lot like last year's car, and the livery that was on it also looked an awful lot like last year's car. Obviously, Ford was the big news. We'd heard hints and rumors about that going in, of course, but to get that confirmed and to talk to Jim Farley, CEO of the Ford Motor Company, about everything they've got planned was pretty cool. But yeah, for me, getting that time with Daniel, we rarely get that kind of like really relaxed time, and also where a driver fully commits to that kind of thing, to get a driver who's really in the mood for it. And poor Daniel had been doing, I don't know, hours, and I'm, not joking, like maybe 3 or 4 hours of media interviews before he came and sat down with us. Yeah, he still had all that energy, and yeah, it was really good fun to get some stories out of him. So for me, that was a highlight of the trip. But yeah, it was just a cool atmosphere altogether.
Got to say, Katie, shout out to you, because I think you got the best laugh out of him on the car when you said they've really gone to town with the livery this year. He loved that. You could tell he knew he shouldn't have been laughing, but he couldn't help himself. But I thought it was a great moment. So congrats. But yeah, I was going to say, because I thought that was a great bit as well, and it was just fun to see him in that environment. I think it was pretty chilled out. But what did you make of that? Because you obviously interviewed a lot of different athletes across different sports, and I think it's quite rare, from what I've seen, to get somebody kind of as relaxed about the situation that a driver like Daniel's going into, because he's kind of going into this weird situation where he's not racing, but he seemed as at peace with it as I thought he was, like way more than I thought he was going to be. I thought he was going to be a bit kind of like, maybe saying some things that you're like, that sounded a bit sad, but he genuinely, unless he's the best actor in the world, he genuinely seemed like he was fine with it. So I just wondered what your take on it was.
Yeah, I think coining it as he's at peace with it is a good way to phrase it. I was really interested to see how that was going to go as we sat down with him. And Laurence, to your point, he had been at it all day. And so to have him fully commit and say, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm going to enjoy myself, I think says a lot about him. I don't think he's ever really in a bad mood, or he doesn't appear to be that way just because he's so engaging and he's got such a great personality. But it would be easy for a guy to say, oh, there's just one more thing that I have to do, and let's just check it off the list so I can get out of here and go home. And I didn't feel like he approached it that way at all, which says a lot about him as a human being. And Nate, to your point, I thought we had a really raw conversation. Like, obviously we had a lot of fun with him and talked about a bunch of different topics, but that wasn't a situation where we were going to go in and say, break down every instance last season, the ups and the downs, and how you were feeling emotionally, mentally, spiritually. But he took it there. He ebbed and flowed in and out of serious conversation while also having fun and laughing. And I just, in interviewing different athletes from different professional sports, like, it's raw in F1. And I just think that that's a testament to the personalities and the people that, we get to cover. And so I really enjoyed, I thought that it had depth, but also with someone like him, you have tons and tons of fun. And I thought he was very thoughtful with some of his answers. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, because he definitely, you could go one or two ways there, couldn't you? As if you're in Daniel's position, you can be like, right, I'm going to make a whole joke of this whole situation and just go down the really, this really stupid line, or I could get really serious and, tense up a bit. And he was just the same as he's been for the last few years. And I've got to say, I know there's a lot of Checo Perez fans that we have listening, but the contrast between Ricciardo and Perez was really telling. And I mean, I joked to you guys when we were there, but we did interviews with a lot of the guys, and Perez was kind of the opposite of that. He was very cagey. I know, like Ricciardo, he'd been doing interviews all day, so everyone reacts differently to that. So it's not criticizing him for that, because I'm sure it'd be tedious for me to do. But I think it just, it shows you the difference in headspace they're probably in going to the new season a little bit as well. So that was great, and we got a little cameo from Christian Horner, so we can technically say we got Daniel Ricciardo and Christian Horner on the pod, even if it was for a brief second. The event itself, though, I mean, because you did ask two questions, I thought the event itself, I would love to have sat with a fan watching that at home, because I had 4 friends there, as you know, and they loved it. They thought it was the best thing they've ever seen. They're big F1 fans.
Now, but your friends, just to chime in, your friends are American, correct? I think that
they are, and they did get a selfie with Danny Rick towards the end, just before our show, actually, didn't they? So
and
I think
two of them were wearing Daniel Ricciardo t-shirts as well.
So they went all in for that. But even before that, they were just amazed seeing the car and seeing Horner, seeing Max, seeing Daniel, seeing Checo, and that really hit home for me that a lot of people doing it in America for the first time, But to be honest, it's not like UK fans have been spoiled by these events, because often they're kind of they've been online events for a long time. So it's just nice to see people there, but just a shame that it did seem like a very big marketing exercise. There's a lot of chat. I think one of the big memes that came out of it was people were like, who are these Red Bull athletes we're talking to, who just were, and they were literally in the different corner of the room, weren't they? So everyone had to kind of spin on their heels, and I couldn't see them. I could just hear them. So as an event goes, I guess I get what they're trying to do. It was a part marketing event, mainly a Ford thing as well. With a lot of media thrown in. So from our point of view, we loved it, but I totally get why fans watching the stream, especially the first launch of the season, sure. Williams have done one and Alfa Romeo have done one since then. So I think that those guys have probably benefited from Red Bulls being a bit more chaotic, because, those two teams seem to have a good one. But yeah, it was great fun.
So chaotic, in fact, that one of the guests, Stefano Domenicali, didn't show up. Wanted.
Yeah, well, that was bizarre in itself, wasn't it?
A bit of a running joke thereafter. But I think that spoke to a little bit how Red Bull the event was, because it seemed that Stefano wasn't that keen to get up on the stage at the start of the season, kind of put himself alongside all of the reigning world champion Max Verstappen, Christian Horner, Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, have a big Red Bull kind of background and be a part of that, when the reality is he's not going to be at many of the other launches. But of course, the real reason he was there was to kind of introduce Ford into Formula One. I think he went on Fox and did an interview with Jim Farley as well. So, but it was a rather awkward moment when his name was called and he didn't show up.
Everybody's turning, looking, all of them looking.
And Max even said, "Oh, there he is. He's at the back."
He pointed up. I think he was pointing at the window. He's there. And so everyone was looking around, and very strange.
Which I get it in hindsight. I mean, maybe he should have decided that prior to the, hour-long presentation beginning. That
at least let the hosts know. Paul Marty Smith and Giselle.
But I do think it was important for him to be there because of the Ford partnership, Laurence, as you mentioned, but that did make for a little bit of an awkward moment on stage.
Although I've got to say, my favorite launch moment so far was a few days later, was when Alfa Romeo launched, and they've got their new team boss and their two of their new senior guys talking, and in the background, I don't know if they'd done it by mistake, but their car just appeared behind them, and they hadn't released it publicly. So everyone on Twitter's like, was that it? Is that the car? And it's a beautiful car, the Alfa Romeo. It's that lovely black and red car. But it was like, oh, yeah, the car's behind them. And then it kind of disappeared, then came back on screen again, then went. And then they were like, and now to exclusively reveal our car. And everyone's like, well,
we've just seen it.
The drivers came out, and then and it looked great, as a physical copy. But it was like, oh, it was that. So I quite liked that for how well they'd planned that event. And still, obviously, someone just hit that button too quickly.
And that there's so much planning, whether it's an online reveal or an in-person reveal. There's so planning. There's so much that goes into it. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And then for, something to go awry, I can't imagine how that feels. You've obviously taken us there. Alfa Romeo's, I thought, well, I want to get your thoughts first. We mentioned that the RB19 didn't look a whole lot different than what we've seen in the past. We made a couple jokes about that with Danny Rick, which we had some fun with, but we've seen 4 cars revealed so far. Laurence, you don't have to rank them, but just, what is your take so far on the liveries we've seen?
No, I'll rank them and I'll stick the Alfa Romeo at the top because it just looks incredible. And I mean, if you look at it and you look at it compared to last year's car, kind of all they've done is just scraped off the white paintwork.
Yeah.
And they've left it with bare carbon fiber. And a lot of teams actually did that intentionally last year because they found that the cars were so overweight that the best way to knock a few, half a kilo or so off was to just start stripping paint off them. So Alfa Romeo have just done it from the start, but they've done it in a really cool way. And Alfa Romeo, it's the last year of their partnership with the Sauber team, which is kind of sad because one thing they have produced consistently is incredible liveries. And in fact, that's pretty much the only part of the Alfa Romeo car that is designed by Alfa Romeo. It's very much a sponsorship deal otherwise, but their in-house kind of Turin-based styling group get together and they come up with these cool liveries every year. But I think that's got to be one of the best I've seen for a while. It's very simple, but it just looks really good. So a send-off for Alfa Romeo, which I think is fully deserved. It's a cool brand. I've enjoyed having it knocking around F1, even if they haven't been fully involved in terms of getting involved with building engines and all the rest of it, or chassis. But that's pretty cool. And then I would have the Williams one second, because I actually really liked the Williams throughout last year. And the Red Bull one last. I mean, the Red Bull one really because it hasn't changed. It's not a bad livery. It's actually, I think, one of the iconic liveries in Formula One. When we look back at it in about 20 years, I think we're going to put it together with the red and white McLarens, the Marlboro McLarens of Ayrton Senna's day, the blue and white and yellow Williams of Nigel Mansell. I think it's that cool, but yeah, it's just a little bit disappointing when the covers come off and you're like, it's a very similar car to last year. Oh, in fact, it is last year's car.
I think that the issue there though was that they had kind of billed it as if it was going to be different, or at least the size of the event suggested, and then the delay, it was like, right, there better be something different under there. So I think if they'd just been like, here's the car, here's the image, I think the disappointment would have been less. Because I agree, I actually really like that car. I think the Red Bull's one of the best looking cars on the grid.
And to give them some credit, they are going to swap it up at the 3 American races. So they're going to get fans to design. Cool. We're not quite sure how much kind of freedom they're going to have, whether it's just kind of the side pods and the strip down the side, or whether it's the full thing. I think the Red Bull, which kind of understandably has to remain on top on the airbox, but the rest of it should be up to fans to decide. So that's kind of cool. I think we can forgive them keeping the same livery if it means they're completely shaking it up 3 races, because we've seen a number of times teams in recent years have changed liveries. I mean, the one that comes to mind always is the Golf livery that McLaren ran in 2021, I want to say. And, that really did look amazing. So I'm sure all those fans out there can kind of like come together and come up with something pretty cool. So
plus, the rival teams are only going to be seeing the back end of that car anyway, aren't they? So, whether they changed it or not, it doesn't matter.
Hey.
So
that's not music to a lot of people listening's ears.
No, about half our listeners just switched off there.
Yeah, exactly. I will say the Williams car, it's nice because there's so many different colors involved and they all work so well together. And whoever decided or came up with the idea to have the Duracell branding on top there, that was genius. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this is beautiful.
I was like that as well. And then people pointed out on Twitter that they'd done that last year at a race, I think at Miami, which I've got to confess, I completely missed it. So apologies to Williams. I obviously wasn't paying enough attention last year, but I that was the first thing I saw. And I wish they'd just had a bit more of the Golf kind of orange there, because they have those specks on the wheel covers and stuff. But yeah, that was a pretty cool part of the car. And I think, again, Williams have got I quite like what they've got going on anyway. So the fact they didn't, I think, again, everyone expected it was going to be massively Golf, and then literally Golf was just like there as a brand, and people were like, oh, that's disappointing. But yeah. And Haas, we're not mentioning the Haas team either. There's going to be a lot of black cars on the grid this year. At least 2. I mean, we're all wearing black as well, as we pointed out before we started recording. So clearly we can't be too critical. But I quite liked what the Haas looked like. I think in person that will look pretty good as well, like the Alfa.
I think so too. The same color schemes, but the Alpha is just more black, a lot more black on that car. So I'm curious though, because Mercedes were waiting for their drop. It seems like they're hinting at an all black car. Is that what we're expecting? Do you have any insight that you want to share?
There's been enough hints that I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed if it isn't.
So they've done, because they've done what Red
isn't.
Bull they've done here. This is the thing, isn't it? So if they then turn out and say here's a silver car, they've only got themselves to blame if people are upset, because it's like you can't just keep teasing a black car, especially when that black Mercedes looks so good as well. I loved what that looked like. It was just fantastic.
And I think the association with, I mean, there's the silver ones which won lots and lots of championships. Of course, the silver goes way back into Mercedes history, but the association with the silver last year, I think they wanted a bit of departure from last year, just because, you know, the memories of that car are not particularly good. And
you don't say.
Yeah, I actually think last year's car looked pretty cool, but yeah, I think they'll be looking to kind of start fresh, both with the car itself, the design, of course, like trying to weed out all the issues they had, but then I think that might also come with a bit of a tweak of the livery.
I flew out after the Red Bull event. I'm curious and also a little scared to ask what the two of you got up to after that. But I did see a pretty iconic photo. So what did you guys do before you left New York?
So this full credit goes to Laurence here. Both of us are huge Sopranos fans, and we were going from Newark International, flying back Sunday night. And Laurence messaged me, I think the day before, saying, hey, when we go back, we should stop here, which is where they filmed the final scene. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but if people haven't seen The Sopranos and don't know how it ends yet, you must have been living in a hole, because it's like the most famous ending ever.
They've had enough time at this point.
Yeah. So we got an Uber there, and then we left ourselves plenty of time, and we were like, let's just go and see if we can. And I assumed going down there, you know, in the Uber down, I thought this would be nice. We'll be able to see like the entry and maybe see the booth where they sat. But because Laurence brought it together, I'll let him finish off the story. But it turned out that we had basically got there at the perfect time, Laurence.
We had. Thank you for teaming me up.
I just felt bad. I felt bad taking the whole story,
man.
because
I mean, it was very cool. We
could
tell we were both incredibly excited about this. So we went in there, and I think the coolest thing about that place is not only is it this famous scene in The Sopranos, how it all ended, but also it's a really kind of authentic old American diner that not only looks like, you know, it hasn't really changed since the 1950s. It's actually an ice cream parlor, and then it's got kind of burgers and stuff as well. Food is incredible. So we went in there, walked down. We're like, is that the table? Is that the table? Oh no, that's a table. And there's still a little jukebox on the table, so you know exactly which one it is. And it had a few kind of empty ice cream and milkshake glasses, and they got cleared away. And we're like, right, we're taking this table. So we just stood around, and then the waiter was great. He took our photo, and some of the locals kind of talked to us about it. You came all this way just because it's a Soprano place. Yes,
I think people to start with thought we'd flown there for that.
Oh boy,
yeah, there was a big confusion.
So
did you just lead them on? I hope.
Yeah, we should have done. And I think when you've got a British accent, you can basically tell people in America anything, and they will. And I'll be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Nice. You should do more of that." You know, that's kind of the vibe. So we should have taken their names. It was these two lovely old ladies. So for the sake, because we're talking about a TV show, in credits that have been Lovely Old Lady 1 and Lovely Old Lady 2. But they were very friendly. They were like saying, you know, they've been going to that place for a long, long time. And they said, oh, you know, the Sopranos probably kept this place open. And it just had a really nice feel to it. You know, it was a really great place. And we got onion rings, which is what the last thing Tony Soprano orders in that scene, before whatever happens to him happens. And yeah, so I thought it was great. I mean, I'm not going to say it was the best part of the trip, because obviously we did a podcast with Daniel Ricciardo. We went to a Red Bull event, but it was damn good. I mean, as from a non-professional point of view, that was pretty great. You know, so I was loving it.
Might be the best bit of my year so far. Maybe
last I mean, it definitely in terms of pictures that came out of that trip. We had us on stage with Daniel Ricciardo on Friday. Then by Sunday, the two of us in the Tony Soprano booth. Then Laurence very kindly took a picture of me in the booth with his really good camera. So I've now got like a profile worthy picture of me sitting there like Tony Soprano.
And one last little tip, if anyone goes there, it's called Holston's, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned that.
We should plug. Yeah,
I couldn't tell you exactly which bit, but just Google Holston's and you'll find it. And if you go there and you the jukebox isn't actually wired in, so you can kind of move it. And if you move it, behind that is a little plaque that says, "This table reserved for Sopranos family." And I thought that was really cool.
I'll just follow up with one final fun fact. The jukebox, because it's clearly a replica, doesn't have "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey on it when you flick through. So because obviously I guess the one that they used was a prop or whatever. But I'm gutted. We should have asked if it was the same one, because when they flick through, obviously when they flick through in the Sopranos, you can see it. But we looked through it and I was like, we must be missing it. It's not in
where
there.
is it?
Not in there. So yeah. So that was. I'm not going to say it took me out of the moment, but it was the one negative, one tiny negative. The rest was
Write
fantastic.
it in a review, please. Write it in the review. I love that you guys got to do that. I think that's so cool. I hope that most people recognized where you were when you posted it. I sure did, because I freaking love that show. But I'm sure some people are like, why are they so jazzed to be in some dingy American diner?
Yeah, because I think if you've seen the show, you immediately recognize that, from whatever angle. But people who haven't were like, okay, that's just a diner. Like you're in New York. Like, you're going to find loads of those. Yeah, like get over it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Well, it's been such an exciting time, obviously. Like, season launches just prove that we're right around the corner from testing and obviously getting the season underway. But there was also some news that came out this week that I want to get into and get your all's thoughts, because it feels like this has been brewing, but maybe this was already coming down the pipe regardless. FIA's president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the head of motorsports governing body, has stepped back from overseeing Formula One in its day-to-day capacity. So I would ask you, Nate, first, because you're the one who wrote the article and the update on ESPN.com. Is this a surprise, or was this coming? What do you make of the news?
Well, I think the timing of it is probably the most curious part of it. So, it was very easy to look at it and be like, oh, this is in relation to everything we've talked about, how Ben Sulayem's been with, undervaluing F1 in his comments, whether it's been kind of being on the wrong side of the Andretti kind of conversation. He was very pro at F1, anti it. There's been a lot of things bubbling behind the scenes. And clearly this is something that he's, has been intended for a while. FIA has brought in a new CEO last year. Steve Nielsen went over from F1, became sporting director. So I think that clearly this was something that was in the pipeline. It was coming eventually. But the fact that I spoke to a couple of people at different teams, and they were like, yeah, we kind of thought that was going to be towards the end of this 4-year election cycle that he's on. And the fact that it suddenly was like, no, this is happening now, I think that to me was the curious bit. And I think maybe it was almost like a get out of jail free card that the FIA looked at, and he maybe looked at and was like, look, we're going to do this anyway. It's maybe a good time to do this. But that is us reading between the lines and guessing. The FIA, it could just be a coincidence. Those things do happen. But I think it probably, in a weird way, is going to save a lot of headaches going into the new season for both, because Ben Sulayem, one of the big criticisms about him from people in F1, people at different teams, has been that he's tried to be front and center of every single thing since he was elected last year, and this, the day-to-day running is no longer on him. So I think that he's not going to be able to be in that position, and if he is, then he's going to be, he's basically going against what he wrote to the teams today, and hopefully it just means that some of those frosty tensions kind of can thaw a little bit, because you could tell it was getting a bit much between the two of them. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, this is also where it's going to be interesting, I think, to see whether F1 and the teams, whether their friction, how much of it was with him and how much of it was with the governing body, because the feeling was that it was more so with him than with the governing body. But we'll see, because obviously the governing body is the same. Mm-hmm. It's just, the day-to-day, their point of contact kind of race to race is changing. Ben Sulayem's still going to be in charge of a lot of tactical stuff, a lot of big thinking strategy things. But yeah, he's moved on, so we'll see. But yeah, definitely surprising. It wasn't something I was expecting to write when when I woke up this morning. But the more you read into it, the more you thought, okay, this isn't a complete shock out of the blue.
Lawrence, who takes over that portion of his role?
Well, it's kind of split between a few people, and so his mandate when he came in was to put in place a much more robust structure looking after Formula One, reforming race control. Of course, he came in after the Michael Massey incident that happened in 2021, the way that season was decided. And he was kind of in charge of the investigation of that, but that investigation kind of started before he got fully in control. And even afterwards, he said he wasn't entirely satisfied with how that worked out. So there's been a lot of reform, and that changed before the start of last season, Michael Massey was out of his job. 2 new race directors were in. So you can't say that he hasn't been making change, creating reform, and then potentially to allow him to move back at one stage or another. He brought in Natalie Robin, who was the former CEO at Volvo, in a CEO role at the FIA, which we haven't had before. And obviously a CEO role indicates that you are going to take control of a lot of the day-to-day business, day-to-day running of the organization. So he has put little bits in place, but like Nate said earlier, I mean, it's so at odds with his approach of the last 12 months, which have all been about putting himself front and center. The jewelry ban, which was a big running story throughout last year, where the drivers were told you can't wear any jewelry in the car, even Lewis Hamilton's nose stud, which was basically fused in and he had to get it removed. That all came directly from Ben Sulayem, and he was very forward in talking about that. He was very open in talking about that to the press. And then, of course, his comments more recently that, again, Nate mentioned, saying that the inflated price tag of 20 billion, Saudi Arabia potentially coming in and offering money to Formula One for the business. And, that was kind of, as F1 pointed out, it was really beyond the remit of what an FIA president should do. So, I think he's had to deal with a lot of the backlash there. We're still waiting for a clarification on one of the other controversial things he's brought in, which is the restrictions on what drivers can do pre-race in terms of what they're allowed to protest, what T-shirts they're allowed to wear, what messages they're allowed to convey, how much that has to be checked by the FIA. That even now, drivers at launches of the cars are saying, well, we are concerned about it because we don't really know what it entails. That's something which he really could have got hold of much earlier and changed. But I think, like Nate says, clearly it was intended at some point that he would step back. I'm a little bit surprised he was so hands-on earlier last year. And now it does seem like an opportune time to de-escalate tensions and perhaps kind of protect a little bit of his own reputation and the reputation of the FIA, and kind of heal some of those wounds that got opened up over the winter, just to step back and hand over some of the running to the likes of Steve Nielsen, Nicholas Tambazzi, and Natalie Robin as well.
It's appeared to be a tumultuous relationship, I think, is a fair way to kind of pose it. So very interesting news that came out.
I was surprised, just to go back to the article we wrote. I mean, we kind of outlined the news, and then I wrote some context underneath of, there's been friction. And I kind of, even though I knew it all, as I wrote it all, it was like, and then this happened, and then this happened. And I was almost like, I might as well. Yeah, it was almost like, do I need to bullet point all this just to make it easier? Because it was like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And if you look back to previous FIA presidents, there's not been that kind of volume of controversies and bickering in such a small amount of time. From memory anyway, there's always been some, but this has felt like it's, each one has kind of almost prompted the next one. So I think that Laurence is right. It's just a good way to draw a line under it, I think.
Some other news coming out today is that Las Vegas has said that they will allow F1 to use the strip, the iconic Las Vegas strip, for the next 10 years if F1 so chooses. 10 years? It's a long time, but I mean, I can't wait for 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix. I think it's going to be awesome, and obviously probably mind-blowing seeing cars zip up and down the strip. What did you make of that news, Laurence?
Yeah, it's good news for F1, I think. I mean, assuming this race is going to be good, it's got so much hype around it. I feel like it can't really fail, but you never know. But I think it is good news. And F1 are clearly keen to stay in Las Vegas. They've invested in this race, so they are basically a partner within the race rather than a circuit somewhere around the world just paying F1. F1 have invested in building up this race, promoting this race. And so to get basically through what is essentially a political hurdle, just making sure that somebody doesn't come in and block it and say, not in my backyard, which would be surprising in Las Vegas considering what goes on in that backyard, but you never know. So to get that hurdle out of the way is good. It opens the door for 10 years. They were talking about lifetime. So maybe all of our lifetimes, there'll be a race in Las Vegas, but assuming it lives up to the hype, great. But the other nice thing is that, look, if you get that long-term commitment, any issues with the first race, any things where people are like, oh God, that really was bad, or like that corner needs to change. If you're knowing that you're going to do it for another 10 years, you make those changes and you kind of agree to put the investment in. So I think it can only be a positive thing.
It's kind of like getting married before you've been on a date, isn't it? A little bit, but you're so convinced the date's going to be a great one. You've maybe been talking on a dating app. You've seen each other. You haven't met each other, but you're convinced it's going to be the right thing. I actually genuinely, when it comes to Vegas, I genuinely think that we're going to see a shift pretty quickly towards, obviously the heartland of F1. I think we'll stay in Europe to a degree, but I think Vegas is going to be the kind of the pinnacle event very, very quickly for exactly the reasons Laurence said. F1's invested in it. It's one of the coolest cities around. And I mean, even if the race doesn't have to be the most thrilling race every year, it's going to be very difficult to top that as a showpiece event. So I can't wait. I'm the same as you, Katie. I know Laurence is buzzing for it as well. It's just going to be unreal. And just think how much money Vegas is going to make from that race over assuming they do it for 10 straight years. That's a lot of money going through that place, more so than usual, which is difficult to say about Vegas.
Full disclaimer, don't take Nate Saunders' dating advice.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying it's good advice or bad. I'm just saying it's like that. But that's my analogy. I'm going to stick with it.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Before we step away, I wanted to ask you guys, which was cooler? And did you see this? Okay, because there's two videos circulating right now. The RB7 going around Bathurst in Australia, and then we saw Charles Leclerc going around in a 2003 Ferrari at Abu Dhabi, which that video was so cool to watch. I'm not sure which one you guys preferred. What did you think when you saw those two videos this week?
Well, they're both amazing, both unbelievable. For me, growing up as a Schumacher fan, the 2002 and the 2003 Ferrari were two of my favorite cars. So okay. Charles wins it. And also he had this mega onboard view. It was just loud. It was great. And I thought they were both fantastic. And it was great. And it was also a bit like, oh man, as great as F1 is at the moment, one of the things that is missing is that sound. I think that cars still do give quite the visor cam has helped, hasn't it, to give that kind of visceral feeling of it behind the wheel. But yeah, it was amazing to see. And it's kind of crazy that those things, 22, 24 of those things usually just like barrel around the same circuits that the current cars are going around, because you've got used to seeing these kind of big clunky things kind of going around and still going very fast. So I loved it. But yeah, the Ferrari would just take it for me. But I mean, it's like apples and oranges, isn't it? They're both two great. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so jealous of those two guys, A, for being Formula One drivers or having the jobs they do, but also being able to do that.
Yeah, the Bathurst thing was pretty cool. And I think if we have any Australian listeners, they would have absolutely loved that, because there's always this thing around F1, like Daniel Ricciardo, when he announced that he wouldn't be driving next year, one of the first questions from the Australian journalists were, are you going to do Bathurst? Are you going to do Bathurst? So to actually get an F1 car there, and that track is incredible. I don't know if people are that familiar with it, but huge long straights and then up basically onto the side of a mountain, around the top, twisting, really tight barriers, almost kind of Monaco style, no room for error section at the top, and then back down on a long straight blast.
It's
so
basically what you'd expect from a circuit if you gave an Australian a pen and paper and said, build a circuit. It's exactly like, there's only a few places in the world where that circuit would exist. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're saying about Australians, but
I'm saying that
I say that's a compliment.
Yeah, no, I mean it as that. They're just like, hey, we'll just do this. Yeah, ballsy. The guys that they don't scare easy, do they, in Australia? Well, you can't as well. If you live with all those spiders and all those animals, I guess they're just like, well, this is just another day.
Yeah. But then the Ferrari onboard footage was fantastic, mainly because Charles Leclerc was really pushing hard. Those cars actually quite regularly go out on kind of demo days, and you'll get a lot of videos on YouTube, often of like, you hear a V6 go past, then a V8 Ferrari, and then the V10 Ferrari. And then if you're really lucky, you get a V12 Ferrari from the early 90s. And those things are absolutely singing. So I'd love to see Charles Leclerc in one of those. But yeah, he was not hanging about. He was not messing about. And I saw there was one Instagram clip where it said that he was 8 seconds off the pole position time of 2022. Which is pretty good for a car that is 20 years old, and only 4 seconds off the race time, because obviously in the race they run with heavier fuel and they run slightly slower. So when you consider he was on demonstration tires, so not the original Bridgestone tires that would have been designed for that car, and not as sticky as the kind of stuff that F1 cars have nowadays, that's pretty quick. Good, yeah. And a lot of that, and this is a little drum I like to beat, is down to the weight of the car. That Ferrari that Leclerc was driving, that 2003 Ferrari, is about 200 kilos lighter than current Formula One cars. And that weight does a lot. Not only does it make the car slower, the more weight you have, it makes it kind of less responsive. They look a little bit lazier, which I think is why that onboard footage looks so good. And also they take a toll on the tires. They kind of increase tire degradation, which is sometimes good, but it's sometimes frustrating for the drivers when they're trying to push. So yeah, seeing a little blast from the past and was pretty special. And I remember a few years back, maybe 2 or 3 years back, Nate, you might remember as well, when Fernando Alonso went out in the
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah.
The Renault from, I think, 2005, might have been 2006.
I think
big difference because one's a V10 and one's a V8, so I think it was 2005.
I think it was the V10 because I remember Lewis was doing an interview at the same time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he heard it and was like, "Oh my God, what that is amazing!" And I think a few of the drivers were there. I think I was 21 actually. I think it was the year he lost the next day to Max.
Yeah.
I think that in my head has just kind of disappeared because of what happened. My brain capacity just couldn't hold that great memory in 24 hours later because of Massey-gate. But well, I wanted to ask as well, Katie, what was out of the two, which was the one that you thought was the best?
I don't have reference to Bathurst until Laurence kind of explained the track. Like, obviously, I know it's an iconic one. So seeing Charles in the Ferrari, and just like that candy apple red and that body type was just so mind blowing. And then to hear it, right? Because my first Grand Prix was in Miami last year. And I remember people telling me around here, oh, well, make sure you have your earplugs, make sure you have this, that. And, it's you're going to be blown away by how loud they are. And of course they are loud. It's more of a zip now, but you don't need earplugs when you're, trackside these days. And so to hear that noise, that it's like, that's mind blowing to me of like where we've come over the years. And so seeing that, and Charles obviously summed it up perfectly. He said, what a day, with a heart emoji afterwards. Like, what a cool moment for him to get to experience that. And
it's just like every little thing, isn't it? Because you've got the way the gear, the upshifts, the downshifts, just that, and that, it just the throatiness of it. I mean, every kid growing up, if you said make the sound of an F1 car, you'd make the sound of a V10, and that kind of, the kind of shifting up and down the gears. And I remember going to Monza in 2006. So that was the V8s then, wasn't it? 2006. But even then, the noise of those engines, and I went and saw the V10s as well, and they were much, much louder. But both of them just cut straight through you. You were sat there. If you didn't have your earplugs in, you were going to not be hearing anything for a few days after that. Sure. So it really did add to that trackside experience, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe I think modern fans maybe enjoy the new generation. It's probably easier to convince the family to go down. You don't have to sit there with your hands in your ears for the whole race. But it was definitely a different era, and one that a lot of people do miss in that sense. Yeah, it was really cool. Both videos, if you haven't seen them, go check them out. We'll also link to it below. As always, like this video, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, and make sure if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to ESPN F1 for more F1 content. Nate Saunders, Laurence Edmondson, Katie George will be back next week to break down more season launches. Cheers.